There's this interesting text in the Bible that says that by being kind to your enemies, you will heap burning coals on their heads, which is really strange because it seems to promote some kind of vindictive kindness, if that's even possible. But actually, there's some really interesting background on this text that I think might just surprise you. Hey there, I'm Ryan Kilgore. Welcome to In the Bible. If you're new here, I do devotional Bible studies, explanations of interesting passages, other videos like that to help you engage with God's Word. If that sounds like something that you're into, I would love it if you would join the community, join me every week, and hit that subscribe button down below to get an alert when I post new content. Okay, let's jump into our text for today from Romans chapter 12 and verse 20. It says, "If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head." This is a pretty interesting text, I think. It's actually a reference to an Old Testament passage. Paul, the author of the book of Romans, is clearly referring to this text in Proverbs chapter 25. He doesn't quite quote it exactly, but he's definitely referring to it there. And I didn't understand this text in the book of Romans until actually I was doing some in-depth study in the book of Revelation. And it's kind of an interesting connection to make, but actually this one passage in the book of Revelation proved to be the key to help me understand this text in Romans chapter 12. So let's see what this text in Revelation chapter 8 has to teach us about what it means to heap burning coals on our enemies' heads. Revelation chapter 8 verses 3 to 5, "And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake." If you're not familiar with Revelation, it's this series of symbolic visions that functions sort of like a Bible puzzle. They make all these references, sometimes obscure references, back to other passages in the Bible. In this vision, the angel takes a censer, which is just a container for offering incense, and he puts fire into it. Well, fire isn't a tangible thing, and so that's just really a reference to burning coals, to bits of wood that are still on fire. He puts that in this censer and he throws it down onto the earth. Now, this angel has just finished offering incense as an offering to God on the altar, the golden altar that is before the throne or before God's presence. And the incense represents the prayers of God's people, and that's actually specifically mentioned in this text. Incense burns and the smoke rises up just like the prayers of God's people rise up into His presence. Now, this incense offering at this golden altar is actually a reference to the sacrificial services that would take place every single day in the temple. They were part of what's called the daily service or the daily sacrifice. In Hebrew, it's called the tamid. And after the angel finishes offering this incense, he throws this censer with the fire down onto the earth. Now, there's another story in the Bible that uses this very same imagery of throwing burning coals. In a prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 10, yes, we're now looking at another story from the Bible. In Ezekiel chapter 10, Ezekiel the prophet sees this vision where a man in linen is told to take burning coals and scatter them over the city of Jerusalem. And this act of scattering these coals is a dire warning. It is a warning to the people of Jerusalem about their rebellion against God. Now, this wasn't an event that took place in reality. It was just a vision that Ezekiel saw. It was symbolic. But it symbolized a real warning or a judgment against the people's rebellion. Now, this same symbolism holds true in Revelation chapter 8. You remember in this story that we've just read, the angel takes this censer with fire or with these burning coals, and he throws it down onto the earth. And this isn't a literal prophecy about something that will actually take place just like that. It's a symbol, it's symbolic. But in the story, it represents a judgment. It's a warning to the people of earth that they are in rebellion. Remember that the angel threw this fire down on the earth just after offering incense on the golden altar, it says, with the prayers of God's people. Now, in this story in Revelation, not long before, God's people actually had been praying. There's this prayer recorded in Revelation 6, verse 10. How long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? In this story, God's people had been killed, and their prayer is that God would judge the people of the earth who have done this to them, and that he would avenge their deaths. And so we see here in chapter 8 that it seems to be that this is an answer to that prayer, that fire then is thrown down onto the earth as a judgment against the people of the earth. And this isn't a final punishment. We're not seeing here a retributive judgment. This is God's verdict against those who killed his people, that they were in the wrong. And this verdict then is a wake-up call. It says, hey, you thought that you were doing what was right, but you were wrong. So wake up, come to your senses, turn around before it's too late. So that's what's happening in the story in Revelation chapter 8. And probably I've just raised a lot of questions in your mind about this story and what does it mean and what's the fulfillment of this prophecy. And for now, I think that's going to have to wait, I'm afraid. But let's take what we've learned about the symbolism of throwing burning coals, and let's go back and take a look again at Romans chapter 12. It says there, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Now that we've looked at a couple other texts, what seems to be evident now is that when you respond to unkindness with kindness, when someone does something unjust toward you and you respond with an unexpected and undeserved attitude of kindness toward them, what is happening here is that you are heaping coals on their head. Some kind of judgment is taking place. A warning is being given by your actions of kindness in place of unkindness. You see, basically by acting this way, a stark contrast is developing. Your enemy's wrong behavior becomes only all the more apparent when it's contrasted with your kindness. And that becomes then an unspoken appeal, an appeal for them to change their course of action, to change their behavior and the way that they're acting toward you. Now, this doesn't fix them. It doesn't exercise control over them. But it's not angry or retributive or vengeful or vindictive in any way. It's just showing kindness in the face of unkindness. But it can, when that person chooses, awaken their conscience and soften their heart. And this is the way that Jesus acted toward those who rejected him, to those who carried out that unjust and shameful execution. His kindness in the face of that injustice that was done to him was like heaping burning coals on their heads. And that, I believe, is what Jesus was talking about in Luke 12:49, when he said, I have come to cast fire upon the earth. In his life and death, always repaying unkindness with kindness was a judgment against the world. And his example stands as an appeal to us today, to do what is right, to follow in his example. So let your life create a stark contrast against the backdrop of the evil and the injustice and the hatred that is so common in our world today. As Romans 12:21 says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. I hope this short study was a blessing to you today. If it was, don't be afraid to hit that like button down below. And if you'd like to see more of my videos when I release them, just click that subscribe button down below as well. If you click the bell icon, then you can choose the notification settings so that YouTube will give you an alert every time I put up a new video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Catch you next time.